Hey there, are you grieving the potential loss of a loved one or feeling overwhelmed with the loss of someone you care about? If so, you're in the right place. Lisa Hartung here, and this podcast is designed to guide you through topics surrounding death and dying. We'll dive into multifaceted aspects of grief, offering you a blend of personal stories, expert insights, and practical advice for your grief journey. May this be a safe space for you to learn, listen, and ask questions about your own life and loved ones. So grab your favorite beverage and let's dive in. Okay, great. Well, I am super excited to welcome Cathie Wallace to our program. Good morning, Cathie.
Good morning, Lisa.
So Cathie is a lifelong spiritual seeker, always looking to expand on her ideas of the holy. She is an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ, the UCC, and is certified as an End-of-Life Doula, an interfaith spiritual director, and a Reiki Master. She's a volunteer doula at Hospice of Southern Maine and is currently halfway through a 2-year mindfulness teacher training program. And Cathie lives in Portland with her husband, Tim, and her children and grandson are nearby. Cathie and I go way back, and so I've been wanting to get her on the podcast and chat with her more about her faith journeys. Cathie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lisa. And it's wonderful to be here with you. I was thinking this morning about how I met you when you were 14, 13. Our paths have crossed and crossed through our lives. So it's joyful to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's such an honor. I think that when working with you, you moved to our town, a little small town in Maine, when I was coming of age. And you really guided myself on this spiritual journey with the UCC. You really opened my eyes to the way that ministry can happen. As you mentioned, our paths have crossed multiple times, not only personally, but with our faith journey as well. And you were so instrumental at the end of my mom's life. We really wanted to work with someone that we knew to help her in her final stage of life. And you were such a breath of fresh air and such a positive light and love for us. And my mom was always like, just call Cathie, helping with your Reiki skills, and then also just being a listening ear and kind of helping her navigate what that looks like. I would love for you to share with our listeners this really unique path that you've taken and kind of what's inspired you throughout this journey, because there's no one mode of thinking. And so that's what I love about you, and that I've really gravitated toward, is that there's no one path of doing everything, and that you've been really open to what you're being called to. So maybe you could share with our listeners kind of the journey through your spiritual life.
Well, what I would say is that I have learned to be a really good listener. I listen for the hints in my life about what's next. I ended up going into ministry because there was a bush that had died 3 years before in a frost, and I turned the corner and the bush was aflame with flowers. And I thought, it just hit me. Oh, resurrection. I have to do something with my life that has to do with death and resurrection. And that's how I found my way into ministry. And then later on, when I knew I would be retiring from ministry, I was listening again, and what I heard was spiritual direction. So I entered a program to be certified as a spiritual director. And I did that for a few years in there when I was retired and trying to figure out what was next. And then something odd happened. I had been given as a retirement gift from my last church a Reiki treatment. I had no idea what Reiki was. I went in and she put her hands on me. I said to myself, oh, this is what I've been doing. People had told me all along that they could feel like heat coming from my hands when I prayed with them. It was Reiki that was happening without my knowledge. The practitioner who worked on me that day said, I'm feeling a lot of energy in you for this. So I pursued it. And around that time, while I was pursuing that, I became a hospice volunteer, which I had always wanted to do. And I took the Reiki with me and discovered that Reiki is a wonderful discipline for end of life. It can relax people if they're feeling tense. It can put people into a sort of dream space where the ugliness or the pain of their situation recedes and there's sort of more spaciousness around it. And gradually at hospice, the nursing and medical staff realized how much Reiki was helping. It's now staffed. There's a Reiki practitioner every day now. So that was a wonderful path. And from there, I did an end-of-life doula certification when it was during COVID, and I wanted to add to what I could offer at hospice. Then at hospice, I started a life story program and worked with people on their stories, their lives. And in a sense, I brought some of that into the care with your mom. It was putting things into perspective. What did her life look like? What was valuable to her about it? What was she celebrating about it? What was she leaving behind? What did she want to leave behind? Those conversations, are really important. And so, end of life doula, I brought that to hospice. And then I had all the way along, Lisa, a centering prayer practice, which is a Christian practice. It has to do with sitting in silence and searching for union with God. That started to feel not quite right to me. It started to feel like, what about the holiness in me? Is it always about some being that's outside of me? And as I was thinking about that, I started reading some Buddhist literature and was very attracted to mindfulness meditation as opposed to other forms of meditation, as opposed to centering prayer. And my kind of thing is, once I have a passion for something, I want to give it away. And so once I started seeing what mindfulness meditation was doing for me personally, I wanted to give it. And so a year ago, started a teacher training program with Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield, and I'm now teaching. So that's sort of how I see the path at this point, and I see it as being about listening.
Yes, I think that it's so beautiful to hear your journey and how you were called to do, you listened, you were called to do different things, and you were able to really bring new strengths to the hospice program and to those around you and the people that you serve. And I think it's so commendable that you are open and willing to sharing those gifts with everyone, because it's so, I'm going to tear up here. You never know how you really make someone feel.
It's true. It's like teaching, in that you don't know the long-term effect of things.
Yeah.
I recently had this experience where I was listening to a hospice marketing video, and suddenly this man came on who I knew and talking about me. You know, you just, you don't know. That's the bottom line. His wife had died a year ago, and
Oh,
he was looking back.
yeah. And it's just such a gift, that you're able to share your strength. We always talk about the ripple effect and how you can touch one person and then that changes their behavior to help others. It's just so wonderful to be part of that and feel that love from you. But so wild, I don't usually get all all emotional during interviews.
I know, I want to give you a hug.
No, I think I'm feeling more of my mom's loss, even though it's been, a year and a half. It's the springtime and the blooms are coming up. When she was sick, she made sure that she And my dad planted probably 1,000 bulbs around our house because she didn't know if she would live through the winter. And so when I see the bulbs coming up, I think of it's what you were saying. It's that growth, it's that rebirth. There's death and then there's rebirth in a different form, I think, in my opinion. And so it's been a journey to think of how mom's showing up in today's realm and keep that spiritual mindfulness with me at all times. And so you were talking a lot about Reiki and how it can really help at end of life. And so our listeners, some of them may have terminal illnesses. They may be caregivers of people with terminal illness or are experiencing the loss of a loved one. I would love to hear how Reiki can support. I love what you said of how it can help someone at the end of their life kind of understand or feel a higher vibration, a higher energy that's coming in and filling them with peace. I would love for you to share a little bit more, if you're open to it, about the healing powers of Reiki, even if you are going through grief. And when working with a hospice, I'm sure that you come across that on a daily basis. If there are any, sometimes when I'm in a Reiki session, I see colors. And I don't know if you could speak to that.
Mm-hmm. You know, what people experience in a Reiki session has everything to do with who they are. You're a visual person. You're a creative visual person. And so all of the artists I've worked on see colors.
Really?
Uh-huh.
That is so fascinating.
Yeah, it really is interesting. And, you know, that's not me. I don't know how I describe myself, but not as a visual creative person. I don't experience any colors at all. I don't experience anything visual. So it really depends. You know, it's an individual experience.
Yeah. Do you feel more energy being moved throughout your body?
Definitely. But what happens in end of life is interesting. The energy becomes collected in the head because the body's dying.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the life still is. Actually, I had a really interesting patient that illustrates this. She was paralyzed from the neck down. It was so interesting to me. I'd never worked on someone paralyzed, and the paralysis was creeping up, and she was going to die. You know, that was her situation. When I touched her body, there was no energy there. There was nothing there. But when I worked with her, I worked with only with her head, and there was a lot of energy there. And she said, you know, that she could feel the peace sort of enter her head and go as far as she could feel it, you know, and then it stopped. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
After that, I've always sort of focused on the head because I realized energy
That's
is.
where the life is.
So with your mom, for instance, you know, I worked
Yeah.
with this part of her.
Mm-hmm. And I remember we called you back on a Friday and I said, I think the end is near. Can you come chat with her about that? And you came out and said, you know, her head is cold now. It's almost like the spirit has left the body and now it's just preparing for the natural transition, which, you know, she ended up passing away on Monday morning. So it gave us a couple of days to say goodbye. And I just think that whole, the end of life cycle is so interesting and beautiful at the same time. It's grieving, but I think the biggest challenge is when you know the body, when you as yourself are ready to go, but your body isn't. I think that's such a struggle.
I know. I saw that with your mom. It was hard. You know, she was ready. She just, her little body just kept fighting. That happens. And sometimes the Reiki can help people let go. But in your mom's case, it felt like she already had let go in a way, but her body was clinging to life.
Yeah, she had FOMO. Well, that Friday we celebrated my daughter's birthday early because she wanted to be there for her first birthday. And so we celebrated on Friday. You know, I read a book by some hospice practitioners and they had said, listen to what your loved one says. And we had been talking about Maeve's first birthday. My mom said, maybe we could celebrate it a little early. And I said, okay, well, do you think Sunday would work? And she said, no. I said, okay, do you want to do it on Friday? And she said, yep. And that was the last day she was fully lucid with us. And then she passed on Monday morning. Isn't that so beautiful?
It's very beautiful. Your mom was very beautiful. Death can be ugly sometimes, and it can be
Yeah.
beautiful. You all made it beautiful for your mom, and she made it beautiful for you.
Mm-hmm. So I'm obviously like very invested in this practice. And I think that hospice is something that we get scared of. We don't want to go down the hospice path. And
Mhm.
I think that there is so much joy and relief for the caregivers when hospice comes in, because there are so many different elements of support. And I was thinking about how your journey with hospice is so inspirational. When you introduced the life story platform, is that something that really took off with the whole hospice community? Because I think it's so wonderful to be able to have those conversations that perhaps family members are feeling too emotional about, or maybe don't know what to ask.
Yes, yes.
The different elements that you have brought to the hospice community, the Reiki practice, which is so spiritual, and then there's the life story practice, which helps people kind of categorize and summarize their life as putting a bow on the end of their lives. And I'm wondering how the hospice community has really embraced those those new traditions that you've brought in, and if that's spread elsewhere within the hospice community. I think it's so important.
I do too. And I do see it elsewhere in the hospice community. Because it was a new thing for Hospice of Southern Maine, it's taken a while for the practice to work its way in, because there was confusion around what social workers do and what doulas do. And I think that that's been fairly straightened out at this point. I see that there are a number of people working with Life Story right now. It didn't take off the way that Reiki took off, because it was not only new, but it looked like something old, but it wasn't. And so, so now I think things are moving ahead.
And for our listeners who might be interested in looking for a doula, what might you bring to this experience of end of life and having a doula?
It is a wide variety, Lisa, of what it
Yeah.
looks like, because it has to do with what the family's needs are.
Yeah.
It is about caring for the whole family. That is one reason why, even if caregivers or the patient is afraid of hospice, if there's education around what happens, which is this care, this total care for the family, I just can't help but feel people would take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was in grief counseling talking with my counselor about when to call hospice, and she said it's better to call earlier because then you can get the support and the care that you need. But it was a quite a jarring switch from let's preserve this life to let's make this life comfortable.
Yes.
And I remember in the hospice office, there were little lifesavers. My mom took one and she goes, "This is funny, isn't it?" Like interesting candy choice to have in the hospice office.
I love your mom.
And the doctor said, "Yeah, you're actually right there." But I think that this work is so touching and so meaningful for all parties. As an empath myself, I'm always interested in how you were able to work with people at the end of their lives and have that emotional connection with the whole family, and then step away and have your personal life, and how you're able to, if you have any tricks or methods that you use to kind of compartmentalize work with life. I think sometimes that's really hard. And especially for caregivers, while it's a labor of love, it's also important to be able to take a step back sometimes and have your own space. How do you navigate that?
Well, I have a practice that I offer to caregivers, which is, and I do this myself, when I'm about to go into a room, I stop and I pause. I take 3 deep breaths and I come into my most centered self.
Mm.
And that's the way I enter the room. And that's the way I am as much as I can be when I'm in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And when I leave the room, if it's been upsetting in some way, I go to the family lounge. I sit down and again, I 3 deep breaths and I come back into myself, my separate self.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like in the room, I'm part of what's happening in the room. And out of the room, I have my own life.
You're fully present when you're with the people you're working with. And then the breath kind of seals that intention and then allows you to step. Mm.
And there are other practices. There's a practice that I often offer to people that comes from the meditation side of my experience, which is a compassion practice. A compassion practice might look something like this. You would feel that you need some kind of comfort. You would sit down in a quiet place with your eyes closed. And you would repeat to yourself words like, may I have deep compassion for myself. May my pain and suffering be eased. May I be as strong as possible in body, mind, and spirit. May I be peaceful and free. And you sit with that and you just repeat it again and again until it feels like it sinks in. And it's just a nurturing practice that really is helpful for caregivers, but also can be helpful for the person who's dying at a certain point in their journey. The compassion practice can be really helpful. It's nurturing, it's helping with acceptance. So that's a practice. Also, with meditation, sometimes I'll do guided meditations now with the person who's dying or the caregiver. That's new since your mom. That's because of the teacher training program.
Yeah. When mom would go into a procedure, she would call me and ask for a guided meditation. And so that's something I learned in my yoga teacher training. We would go through and going into a forest, full of the sun coming through and moss covered ground was her happy place. And so we went there throughout her cancer journey. It's so incredible what the mind can do when you turn off the busyness that is, and you sit with breath and meditation and you just let yourself be guided. It's almost like taking a nap and becoming refreshed after, or calm, feeling more of a sense of calm. I'm so intrigued to hear about your teacher training because I think that, especially in this world where we're busy all the time, mindfulness meditation isn't just for people at the end of their life. I think this could help, kids in school before an exam. I would love to see it in public schools being offered from kindergarten or preschool. I asked Maeve if she'd like to meditate with me. So sometimes she's like
It
2.5-year-old.
It has. My daughter has her son meditating now. And it's very funny because I bought him this book, and there's a place in the book where one of the characters is in tree pose. So they're doing yoga and they're meditating. And my grandson loves that. He's like, look at me, I can do it too, at age 3. So
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so mindfulness meditation, it's broken open my life. I have not done anything that's
Transformational.
been as gratifying or fulfilling. And
How incredible.
yeah, it's too complicated to go into in a podcast. The teacher training has been wonderful. Jack and Tara are fabulous teachers, and I'm very lucky to be studying with them. I'm at the point in the training where I've taught one class and I'm now about to do 2 practicums that are required for certification. It's just so fulfilling to pass something that's this meaningful to me on to people, especially that I care about. My first few classes have been people I know and care for. But my plan is to take this into hospice. My sort of long-term plan is to offer an introductory class for volunteers. And when I'm certified, possibly for caregivers as well, and for the nursing staff. That's sort of what I'm working on now.
And with the mindfulness meditation that's been so transformational for you, is it a daily practice that kind of is a mindset shift? Or is it a sitting down? And I know your daily meditation is very much a part of your own well-being. And is that mindfulness practice part of, have you integrated that into your the normal daily practice that you've been doing?
I had a wonderful experience, which is when I was getting into meditation, I had tea with the daughter of a friend of mine who had died. I told her what I was doing, and she said, well, I've been on the Buddhist path for 20 years now, and I have a daily Sangha that meets online. Would you like to join us? So every day I have this wonderful community that I sit with every morning. We sit for half an hour and then we share observations about our practice for 15 minutes. My life hinges around that community now. It's the way I used to feel about church community. When I was a minister, I went into ministry because I wanted to build community in a fractured world. This community is now holding me in the fractured world, and I'm blessed.
I think so often when we are, or as a caregiver, when there is, you don't know what time of day it is, or if you've eaten, or if you've showered, and having just a little, even if it's 5 minutes, to sit down and have that quiet contemplation, that meeting that you have with yourself and, the powers that be, is the most important one of the day, because it fills your cup up so that you can give to others.
Yeah. And I'm currently intermittently doing an afternoon meditation time as well. I'm working on that.
Is it a different mindset than with the Buddhism Sangha in the morning?
It's a continuation.
Ah.
I think it's important to say that mindfulness meditation and Buddhism in general is not a religion. It's a life path. It's possible to have a Christian background. Everyone I'm teaching comes from a Christian background. And I actually had one person say to me after the first class, mindfulness meditation has made me a better Christian. It's not, the two are not exclusive.
Yeah. I would say that the mindfulness meditation has changed my life. I didn't come to it until yoga teacher training back in 2018. And I think what's interesting for listeners is that it's a journey. The most important part is that you just show up for yourself consistently. That's the hardest part, is getting to the mat or getting to the chair and setting time aside for yourself to go through just being present.
Just being present, because we in our lives tend to be rehashing the past or rehearsing the future. That's what our monkey minds do.
I'm so interested in how tying mindfulness meditation into end of life or just after someone passes can help someone through that journey, because sometimes when we sit with our own thoughts, they can be very dark. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice or thoughts that have helped you or clients in the past kind of be open to. I always like to find the silver lining in sad situations, but when you're so overcome with grief, it's almost crippling. Is there a technique or tool that you use to kind of help someone move through that grief?
The thing is, mindfulness meditation will do that because it's keeping you in the present. It's not letting you get lost in your memories. By sitting and breathing, your brain learns to quiet down and also to focus. Like what we're doing in mindfulness meditation is we're training our brains to be present. That it's really as simple and complicated as that. So if we're grieving and we're sitting and we're meditating and we're focusing on our breath, we're not lost in the past. There are techniques for working with grief, meditation techniques when you get deeper into the practice. But even just sitting and breathing can be helpful. My advice really for people who are grieving is get your support network, resource yourself. That's
Mm-hmm.
something we say in meditation. And what we mean by that is like your mom with the scene that you kept recreating for her. We
Mm-hmm.
can think of our own resources. Like for me, it's Clearwater Lake, where
Yes.
when I think of the lake, I feel loved and calm. So in grieving, when we need a break, resourcing is really important. Be able to take a rest from grief because it's exhausting and it can
Yeah.
just take over your life. And it's appropriate for it to take over your life for a while, but not so much
Mm-hmm.
that you withdraw from the world. It's how can you have your peeps around you?
Yeah, community is so important. And I keep talking about that, how we don't have to go it alone. And it can feel like such a grave situation. And the unfortunate thing is, you're not the only one. Other people have also experienced similar situations. And what I've found is helpful is if you can find communities of people who also have lost either a child, a spouse, a parent, or a best friend. And there are communities out there that are very fine tuned to specific losses to then really acutely help in your specific situation.
Those groups are a priceless resource.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt. And you can
Mm-hmm.
almost always find them through the hospital that you've been working with, or certainly through hospice. Hospice has its own set of groups. Don't be alone. That's the message.
Yes, don't be alone. And if you're in a remote location, there are online services or telephonic services that can really be helpful. I'm just thinking of all of these wonderful tools that you've been able to share with us. And I love the mindfulness meditation. I think Reiki is something that's so powerful. Just thinking about my own experience with my mom and how she went through a Reiki session, and we went through the Dempsey Center in Maine, which is such a wonderful resource for anyone living in Maine and struggling with cancer or living with cancer. And I would hold her feet or her head while she was receiving the treatment. And I felt this immense sense of power coming out of her feet and into my body. And I thought, what a gift. It was so powerful. I was like I couldn't move. And I was like, okay, I've got some of mommy in me now. Like, mom's spirit has joined me in this. But
Beautiful.
um, thinking of someone who might not have done Reiki before, I wanted to like normalize it. And sometimes Reiki is physical in that hands will be at different parts of your body, but Reiki can also move energy above one's body. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm a toucher, but I ask permission. There's an occasional person who really doesn't want to be touched. I'll do it off the body. I think Reiki, really, if you've never had Reiki before, what happens is you sit or you lie down. The practitioner has their hands either on your energy centers, your chakras, or above them. And what's happening is there is a movement of energy in the body. Sometimes energy gets blocked in one chakra or another. And what happens is the energy sort of breaks up the blockage. And you can
Mhm.
feel it as a Reiki practitioner. You can feel a blockage and you can feel it break up under your hands. It's a very relaxing modality. If you've had massage, you can go to a Reiki practitioner and lie on a massage table. That's what I do with staff at hospice. I have a massage table I pull out for Reiki. And it's just very gentle. At the very least, you will feel relaxed. You will get
Mhm.
relaxed. At the best, you will actually feel the energy moving in your body and you'll feel a sense of increasing balance. Give it a go.
Give it a go. Yeah, we talk about that a lot with yoga too. Yoga is like you're banging on the different pipes within your body so that you can let the energy and the blood flow. And I agree, give it a go. My mom would come out of her treatments and say, I feel like my tumor has shrunk, or, you know, I'm just feeling so much better. And so I just think if that's how you come out of the session, then continue doing it, because, you know, I think everyone finds a different tool, or a whole toolbox of tricks that work for them. But I think Reiki and mindfulness are just two really, really special and obtainable. You know, you don't need anything else to, aside from yourself and your mind and your breath, for mindfulness meditation.
Right.
And I think that's such a gift, because you can do it. I know I do it when I sit down on an airplane and I'm like, okay, let's just calm and center ourselves before the flight. You know? I can't wait to try it with my daughter as she's she's coming up, you know, maybe we could really normalize mindfulness meditation.
You brought up yoga, and that is another thing that I recommend to caregivers.
Yes, yes.
Another healing modality.
Because you're almost so ingrained in the movement that you forget about your monkey mind, because you're like, gosh, how do I actually stand in this position, right? How do I stand in tree pose without falling? And really focusing on your root to rise, is what we say, right? Or even just getting outside and moving your body, even if it's for 5 minutes around the block, just receiving the vitamin D from the sun, or the fresh air, or the wind, or the rain or snow on your face, is just so Mother Nature coming in and healing us in that way. Ah, what a gift.
Or a garden, dear Lisa.
Or a garden. Yes. Yes. Getting your hands in the dirt. There's something so refreshing about that, or just sitting and enjoying the greenery around that. And I'm so glad that you shared about the bush springing to life, Cathie. Like, oh, it's so wonderful thinking about that, and how it's, you know, there is growth after death. There's new life after the resurrection, right? I'm so excited for you in this teacher training journey. You're working with the best of the best. I want to support you in this journey in any way I can. And we know that you have another year left in your teacher training, and then you'll be sharing your gifts more publicly with people. How will people, if someone is interested listening to this podcast and they wanted to get in touch with you, either now or in the future, how could they work with you?
Well, shall I just give you my email?
Yes, you could do that.
Wallace Cathie, WALLACECATHIE @gmail.com.
What a gift. Thank you, Cathie. I cannot wait for your class to come out and for you to work with individuals. I know that you've been such a spiritual guide for me throughout life's journey. And you're like my spiritual guru. And I'm always looking to you for light and new ideas, and ways to connect with source in whatever form that may be for the given season. And I'm just so, so grateful for the gifts that you share with one another, with our community, and you are a light. So thank you so much for coming today, Cathie.
Thank you, dear Lisa.
Hey everyone, Cathie and I originally recorded that episode in February of 2024. And oh my goodness, so many nuggets of wisdom in there. So grateful for Cathie and all of the light that she shines in the world. She has now graduated from her mindfulness meditation program with Tara Brach and Jack Kornfield. And while she does work predominantly with the hospice community, if you would like to have a one-on-one with her, you can connect with her directly. I'll put her email in the show notes. And again, if you have any questions about the show, you can click send us a text in the show notes, and we will get back to you, and look forward to chatting with you all soon. Hope you have a great week. Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Giving Grief Grace. If you found the content interesting and think it could help a friend or a loved one, please share it with them. Subscribe to this podcast and get a weekly dose of positivity. And while you're at it, please leave a review. If you enjoyed the show and want to support me financially on my grief journey, I'm raising funds for Project Purple, a nonprofit whose mission is to see a world without pancreatic cancer. I'm doing this by running the New York City Marathon in November 2025, and I'll leave a link to my fundraising page in the show notes.
If you've lost a loved one and are looking for support in an online community, consider joining our free private Facebook group, Giving Grief Grace. May you be kind to yourself in the week ahead and give yourself grace. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.